Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. Today I'm doing some thrift flips using the new IOD Summer Release and Redesign. For my first project, I'm going to be working on this beautiful metal clock that I thrifted. Now, I loved the shape, but I felt like the face of the clock was quite dated and a little bit distorted. So I'm going to take the clock hands off first and the clock mechanism, and I'm going to give the inside part of this clock a makeover. I already like the outside, so I'm just going to be focusing on the inside today. My first step after cleaning is using Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in white. I am going to be leaving the clock face design that's on there already. I don't think I would have been able to remove that without ripping it, and then I'd be dealing with an uneven surface, so I felt like I would just work with what was going on in the center. So I'm going to be applying 2 coats of this primer. The primer is going to block that image underneath from coming through my paint layers, and it's going to help my paint to stick well. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's purely white mineral paint. I'm going to end up doing 2 coats over the top of my 2 coats of dry primer. I decided that I wanted to have a brighter white face for the clock. The outside is already that beautiful cream tone. It's already got that distressed look to it. I wanted the center to just sort of be a lot brighter and really a feature. When that was dry, I took out the new Saint Germain transfer, and I'm going to be cutting one of the designs from there in half. Obviously, I can't fit it all on the clock face, and I really like these darker, moody sort of florals. So here I'm just using my fingers to crease a line to help me cut out what I'm going to be able to fit. And then I'm going to remove the backing of that transfer and then position my transfer in the center where I want it to go. I'm then going to make sure I've got it positioned well, and then I'm going to press down and start rubbing. So I'm using the transfer stick that comes with the pack, and I am rubbing all over my design. It does have a little bit of adhesion, so it's going to stay in place while I am rubbing the transfer down. And I'm just picking up a section of that plastic and then starting to rub, and I'm just going to continue to do that until I have all of that transferred down. The mineral paint that I used has a built-in sealer, so the transfer came off and adhered really easily. Once I'd made sure all of those sections were down, I took out a little craft knife and I'm just gently poking a hole through the transfer where the clock mechanism needs to go later. I then took out Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin, and I'm going to be applying 2 coats of this over the top of my transfer to make sure that it is all sealed and protected. Now, my paint is already sealed. It has a built-in sealer, but you do want to add a sealer to your transfers just to protect them. When the sealer was dry, I took out IOD's Sibel transfer. So this is a gilded transfer pack from a previous release, and I'm just going to be cutting out 4 of this particular design here. I'm going to be positioning them at the 12, 3, 6, and 9 positions just to make it a bit easier to actually be able to tell the time on this clock, even though I am imagining it's probably just going to be more of a decor piece. So I'm just making sure that that's all down, and then I'm going to start adhering the other transfers in those other positions. I then took out IOD's Etiquette's transfer. This is a design from that pack that I haven't used yet, so I'm just putting that in position, and then I'm going to start rubbing. When you are using the gilded transfers, you definitely want to press a little bit lighter and sort of focus your rubbing in the areas that have the sections that you want to transfer. I then sealed over the top of my gilded transfers with Extreme Guard in Satin. Finally, I decided that I would do a little bit of dry brushing with my purely white paintbrush. I've offloaded most of it, and I'm just lightly going over the top of the frame. I love how it looks, but I did just want to lighten it up just a little bit, so just dry brushing in those areas. When that paint was dry, it was time to reattach the clock mechanism. I felt very lucky to find this beautiful ornate clock, but remember, if you buy a clock mechanism, you can turn a lot of different things into beautiful ornate clocks like trays. I have done a previous video where I did this. I will link it in the description below. And here's a look at our finished clock. I just love how this turned out. The Saint Germain transfer florals are absolutely stunning. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my second project, I'm going to be working on this little shelf sitter that I got from a dollar store here in Australia. My first step is to use a paint scraper to remove the raised lettering on the surface. I then took out Redesign's Nestled Whispers transfer. This is a 3-page transfer with beautiful birds and florals. I'm going to be using this design here, so I'm just working out how much is actually going to fit on my sign before I go any further. And I'm also paying attention to that hue harmony guide that they have, those little dots on the side that I can use as a bit of a guide for my color choices. I'm also going to trim off some of those extra florals that are above the bird. I put that to the side and then took out Paint Couture's Simply White chalk paint. I'm going to go in and paint over the top of that center section there. I went in and I did 2 coats, but I did notice that I wasn't getting the coverage that I wanted, so I decided to take out my salt wash texture additive. I'm going to be adding it to the same Simply White chalk paint that I just used. This is going to thicken it up, it's going to create some texture, and it's going to create more of a weathered look, almost like weathered siding. I thought that would fit in quite well with what I already have going on here. So I ended up doing 2 coats of that. At this stage, I wasn't sure what I was doing about the frame around the outside, so I did avoid getting paint on it. When that was dry, I took out the Nestled Whispers transfer that I had already pre-cut. I'm going to peel the backing off and then I'm going to position it in place. Now there are little indents in between each of the little slats of wood there, so I'm not going to get a perfect transfer here, and the transfer is going to sort of dip into those little crevices there, but I just transferred it the best I could, and overall I was really happy with how this sweet little bird looked on the surface. So I'm just continuing to rub the transfer down, and then when that was done, I took out the Classic Vintage Labels transfer by Redesign. This is one of the designs from there. I'm actually trimming that bottom section off because I want to split the text. I want to have the Jardin sign up the top here. You can see I am starting to transfer that down. I really love how the shape of that banner complements the shape of this shelf sitter. So I'm going to be adding that up the top, and then the bit that I cut off I will add down the bottom. So remember, you can do that. You can cut up your transfers to suit your project, and I do like to add some sort of typography to my projects if I can. I just think they just really tend to finish the projects off. So I've got that top one down. Now I'm going to start adding the Paris design down the bottom. If you don't have access to transfers, remember you could use decoupage paper, stencils or stamps for this kind of project instead. I then took out this offcut from the Queen's Glory transfer by Redesign. This is some script that I took off that transfer, and I'm just going to randomly position it and begin rubbing that text. I want this to look like the text is a little bit in the background, and I'm going to just sort of randomly add it. I'm going to rub at it, then pull it off and then reposition it wherever I want it. I could have probably used a stamp for this, but I really liked the gold tone of the script writing. I felt like it tied in nicely with the colors that were already going on in this transfer. So as you can see, I'm just positioning it, rubbing it a little bit over the text that I want to go in that area, then lifting it up and repositioning it somewhere else. There are 2 pieces like this on this transfer, so I still have those for another project, and I definitely like to do that, to use bits and pieces of my transfers. It just makes them go that little bit further. And it definitely gives your work a little bit more of a unique look because you're using things in a different way than it was probably designed to be used. So I'm just going to continue to do that, randomly position that transfer offcut and rub the text down that I want. If I inspire you to try any of the Redesign or Paint Couture products used in today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. I will put it in the description below. Once I finished adding the script transfer, I took out Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin. I'm going to be using that to seal over the top of my transfers. I did not go up onto the wooden frame on the outside. When that was dry, I took out Redesign's Reflections mould, and I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Rapid Casting Resin in white. I'm going to be pouring out equal parts step 1 and step 2 into a silicone cup there. I think I used about 20 mils for that larger outside frame design. I'm going to stir it really well for about 30 seconds, and then I'm going to carefully pour that into the mold that I want to use. I'm actually going to end up casting 2 of these. I'm going to pull it out. It's only just about ready. It took about 10 minutes, and here I'm going to start working out how I can use it on this frame. I'm going to begin by cutting that beautiful ornate top design from the sides of the frame. I'm going to be positioning that one up the top, and then I'm going to cut off the right part of the frame, and I'm going to be using the left part on my outside frame there. And then you can see I have cast another one. This time I'm cutting off the left part of the frame, and of course that beautiful top design there, because I want to use the right side to finish off, as you can see here, to finish off and bring the 2 sides together. I'm then going to start cutting at the top elegant design there, and I'm actually flipping it over, and I'm going to use that to continue the top design to meet the bottom part of the frame. So I know I might sound like I'm using complicated instructions here, but you can see how I've just basically cut apart that resin frame to fit my project. So remember, you can definitely do that, and I'm using resin today because there are parts of this frame mold that do go off the edge, and whenever that happens, I want to have the strength of the resin as opposed to using clay. So I am gluing my pieces down using my Gorilla Super Glue Gel. I'm not worried about the gaps that you can see here because I will be using my salt wash texture additive a little bit later, and that will help fill in those gaps. So here you can see I'm coming in, my glue is dry, and I'm going to start adding the same salt wash mixture that I used on the background of this sign. I am now adding over the top of the wood frame and the resin pieces that we've glued down. So I'm really working that salt wash mixture into those crevices that are in between the pieces of resin frame that we glued together. That's filling in the gaps really nicely. And then I'm also going to go in and start adding it to the outside frame section as well. I'm doing a dabbing and stippling motion to create texture, and I ended up only needing to do 1 coat for this. Once the salt wash mixture was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Vera at the Ballet mineral paint. This is a beautiful dusty pink, and I am adding that just to the front frame design. So I'm not going to be going on the sides or the base. I'm just focusing on that beautiful ornate frame that we've added. So it's going to really frame out the beautiful bird and the French typography in the center. This paint has a built-in sealer in it, and remember, we have sealed the inner section so I can wipe off the paint if I make any errors. And then when that was dry, I took out that Extreme Guard in Satin, and I'm going to seal the salt wash and chalk paint mixture that is not sealed at this point, and I want to use some glaze soon, so I want that to be sealed so I can wipe back as much or as little as I want. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Light Brown Sugar Antiquing Glaze. I'm going to begin by really working it into the beautiful pink frame that we have added to the front. I'm going to work in sections, even though my paint has a built-in sealer, and then I'm going to wipe back that excess so that it sits in the lower points and gives us a little bit more definition. Now, obviously, if you don't like an antiqued look, you could definitely leave this step out. I'm also going to add the Light Brown Sugar Antiquing Glaze to the rest of the frame as well. When the glaze was dry, I took out that Simply White chalk paint again, and I'm going to be doing some dry brushing. So I'm offloading most of the paint onto a paper towel, and then I'm lightly running my brush over the top of the high points. So we're going to have the glaze sitting down in the low points to create definition, and this beautiful white dry brushing is going to really highlight all of the ornate details. And if I get too much, I can just wipe some of that back with a wet wipe. Once I finished dry brushing over the ornate frame section, I also did a little bit of dry brushing on the rest of the sign frame. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic. I began by running my brush over the high points of the frame. I wanted to add a little bit of gold. I did find that it was a little bit darker than I wanted, having it over the entire frame. So I did go in quite light with it to begin with, and then once I'd finished doing that, I decided I would go back in and do a bit more dry brushing to tone down the bronze on most of the side sections. But I did still want to make the top and bottom ornate details more of a feature, so I'm going in heavy, but I'm just focusing that bronze on particular sections. So I'm noticing where there's beautiful sort of curved details. Obviously that top section, I really want that to be a bit of a focal point. There's a couple of curved bits on the top left and right that I'm highlighting with that bronze, and then I'm also going to add it more heavily on the bottom scroll ornate details there. And here's a look at our finished shelf sitter. I am really pleased with how this turned out. I think the transfers layer perfectly together and that mold finishes off the sign. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my final project today, I'm going to be working on this little jug here. I'm going to be giving it just a little makeover. I'm going to begin by adding this White Night Gloss Clear Coat Spray. And then I'm also going to be using Paint Couture's Extreme Guardian Satin. I'm then going to be using this piece here. This is from the new Florography Paint Inlay from IOD's new summer release. As I'm working on a curved surface, I am adding some little dart cuts to my paint inlay first. I'm then going to apply a generous coat of my Extreme Guard in Satin to the surface. I've already got my dry clear coat on the surface there to help the product stick, and then I'm going to press my paint inlay design side down into the wet medium. I'm going to mist it with my water mister, and then I'm going to use a wet wipe to start applying pressure and also to spread that moisture a little bit. I let it dry completely, and then I came in and added some more water to the paint inlay, gave it about 60 seconds, and then started to pull away. Unfortunately, this was a bit of a fail, guys, and I did try and fix it with my usual, applying a bit more of the satin clear coat, but I'm thinking that maybe I didn't get good enough coverage with the spray sealer, so there were sections that were missing. But I wasn't going to give up on this project. I felt like it could still come out looking good as more of a weathered old vintage jug, so I embraced it. I'm going to seal it with that same clear coat that I was using before, and then I took out Pentart's Fine Line Crackle Step 1. I'm going to apply an even coat over the top of the entire outside and also a little bit on the inside as well. So yes, this is a little bit of a fail. Some of the design did not transfer, but as I said, I didn't want to give up on this piece. I think it still looked really cute and that I could make it look like it was authentically weathered and aged. When that was dry, I took out the Fine Line Crackle Step 2, and I'm going to apply it in the exact same areas where I have Step 1. The beauty of this particular product is that it does already have a little bit of an antiqued look to it. So I am again embracing that look. So I'm going to go in and add that even coat of the Crackle Step 2. And then I did end up using a hairdryer to speed up the drying process. I do find that that gives me more crackle than if I had have just let it dry naturally. Now you don't have to use the fine line. You could definitely use Paint Couture's normal crackle. I went with the fine line here because it just went more with the look I was after. So when that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Aged Cafe Perfect Pigments. I'm going to get a little bit on my brush, and then I'm going to start running those pigments over the top of the cracks. I really already liked the color that the jug was, so using the perfect pigments is going to help maintain that while still allowing those cracks to show. So I'm just going to continue to add those pigments, working them into the beautiful fine line cracks. I am using a wet wipe occasionally. You do still have to be careful. You don't want to dissolve those pigments. And I am going to seal this with that spray sealer again when I'm done. And here's a look at our finished jug. Despite this being a bit of a paint inlay fail, I think it turned out really sweet and I definitely think it looks antique. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video and that it's given you some ideas on how you can use IOD's 2025 summer release and of course the redesign molds and transfers. Let me know if you had a favorite project from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find a full product list and my affiliate links in the description below. Thanks for watching.